with Google Earth, you can also change the angle and you can change the perspective so that you can enter the map in a variety of ways. If we move on to day 2, we notice how much land we've just covered, how much area we've just traveled. But let's say you're really interested in Texas and you want to go in and say, well, here's Route 66, but what does it look like today? You can just zoom in and continue to zoom in and continue to zoom in and begin to see the development. And you can see just where the Jodes were juxtaposed to the modern highway system. I want to take a quick moment here to mention that students in my literature classes tend to wonder what the difference is between reading and reading into. They say, I don't understand why teachers always want to read into the text. And one thing that's just terrific about this tool is that you see the landscape stretching wide out across the entire country here. But you can also zoom out and say, where did the story take place? What are we looking at here? For example, in literature classes, we talk about the layers of understanding. We look at the storyline, the plot, the characterization, and often we look at symbols. So when we're studying the Grapes of Wrath, we may focus, for example, on the turtle in chapter 3 as a metaphor for the working class. And if a student decides to focus in on the turtle or focus in on Judeo-Christian symbology in the Grapes of Wrath, he or she can get more focused on the landscape that was covered. And with Google Earth, a student who, and now I'm jumping forward a little bit, a student who chooses to create his or her own lit trip could focus entirely on symbols and have these push pins that we've talked about embellish the symbols and how they appear along the road, along the way in the Grapes of Wrath. As we get toward the end of the road, we can click on, and if you notice, sometimes when you click on one of these push pins, you get the arrows going in 4 directions, which simply means there are layers right here of push pins, of possible ways of looking closer at the text. And if you come closer, you'll see that it separates out to this road sign and then the arrow. But no, there's still 2 under there. So I have to focus in even further until finally I notice that the author of this particular lit trip has created 2 very close. And finally, I want to mention that these lit trips so far have really emphasized the story. They've really emphasized the plot and the chronology of the narrative. But another way that lit trips can be created is along the idea of biography. And I know many of my colleagues here at Peninsula College get very excited about the idea of visiting the home or the community where, let's say, James Joyce lived. And there is a lit trip called The Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man. But maybe you're interested in John Keats, or maybe you're interested in Louise Erdrich. Any of those potential curiosities can be explored through Google Lit Trips, and you can do so either textually along the lines of a narrative, or you could do so through biographical information, and you can actually zoom in to the neighborhood where, let's say, John Keats lived and explore along those lines. You could also combine a literary figure and another artist and create a lit trip around that connection. And once again, I want you to think about layers and the way in which you can focus on theme, or you could focus on metaphor, you could focus on symbology, or you can simply focus on the physical places where these things occurred. You could look at drought, you can look at hurricanes, or you can simply look at whatever aspect of the landscape most interests you. So what we've been talking about just now, is the potential for looking at the Grapes of Wrath, again from a literary perspective, where we're looking at landscape and layers of symbols and different transparencies coming over the top of these maps. But if you go to Google Lit Trips and you find that there really isn't anything there that meets your curiosities or your needs. One really wonderful potential project is to get your students together or a group of people together who are interested in perhaps population or drought or agriculture or various questions that might be historical or social science based or natural science based. And you can create your own maps, create your own Google trip. And in this case, it wouldn't necessarily be a lit trip, but it would be a layering of information and a layering of exciting bubbles and views and images that would bring your students in along the lines of what most excites them as students, and bring that to the literature at hand to help them understand the depth of potential, both for the writing, for the artistry, and also for this new technology we have through Google Earth and mapping. And so I encourage you to first explore what's out there already and then create your own. And finally, I just want to say that engaging the text in this non-linear way, in this cyclical manner, can be really exciting for students because that's their world, that's their climate that they're working in. And so I just want to thank my colleagues who encouraged me to not be so wary of technology because it's pretty easy to use. Thanks for listening.